Good afternoon. This is Reading for Charity again. And today, well, the history and social influence of the potato. So, I struggled so hard to get hold of this book. I actually got scammed twice on Amazon buying this book from secondhand dealers. There was twice I got notifications that the book had been delivered, and I was sitting here empty-handed going, no, it hasn't. And I couldn't get my money back because, as far as the seller was concerned, the book had been delivered properly and it was signed for, and no, it hadn't. So, scammed twice trying to get hold of this book, and it's hard getting hold of this book. You can't get hold of it for cheap. It's a big old tome. It's relatively rare. It has a little bit of fame attached to it, like bizarre niche fame attached to it. So it's hard to get hold of. Eventually, I just descended to using a PDF that I got hold of the book because it was the only way I was going to read it. And yeah, 800 odd pages about potatoes is an interesting read. Yeah, is an interesting read. But Redcliffe Salaman is actually an excellent author. He is he's that kind of post-war good doer where people are at the end of the kind of Second World War, when the NHS got started and people had decided that enough was enough. We couldn't have a huge chunk of the population basically living on nothing and dying early, and it was for the good of the country that we'd actually have people living and thriving for a change. And Salman basically wrote this as reasoning why. So he has a really interesting idea in the book, which is that potatoes. He uses Ireland as a really good example for this. So Ireland is written all the way through that the potato is sufficient to keep a man alive, but because it can keep a man alive, it's all you're going to get. So the poor in Ireland could survive on potatoes. So the cost of labour dropped until all they could afford was potatoes. Because potatoes were so ubiquitous until the famine, and were essentially good for you, that was it. You ate potatoes. You were poor. You ate potatoes, and they were locked into a symbiosis between the two, the poor and the potato. You ate potatoes because you were poor, and you were poor so you could afford potatoes. That's the way round. And Salman, even though he's a do-gooder, and because he's a nice and decent person, even him couldn't get past the filthy, stinking peasant sitting in his hovel eating the potatoes. I mean, because even for a decent person, when you're seeing someone at that level, and I used this phrase a few times, someone who isn't actually living, they're just surviving. They are no more than animalistic at that point. The Paula Spencer was a really good example of that book. In that book, where she isn't, she's not living, she's just surviving, and she's just going through an animal instinct. There's no thought being applied to what she's doing. And Salman kind of uses the same argument in this, which is when all you're getting is poor quality food, potatoes and nothing else. You're not ever got the power to engage your brain. Your brain is actually costs a lot of energy, physical energy, to engage your brain in actual thinking. And if you've only got enough energy to trudge your body to a field, to work in the field, and then trudge home again, and that's all the energy you have, you never actually engage your brain at all. And so Salman is basically making the point that the potato is, while being vital to the survival of the poor people of Ireland for a long period of time, it also, kept them locked into that poverty. Now, it's kind of a very short view of capitalism. Was it really potato that kept them trapped there, or was it capitalism in general that kept them stuck there? But no, it's very much written of its time, which is 80 odd years ago. But it's an excellent, enjoyable read. It's I think that what the description I read of it was part fiction, part history, part archaeology, part mythical. And I can understand that quote about the book. I think I've paraphrased that, but I can understand that quote about the book because he mentions in it that the potato was considered a godless vegetable because it's not mentioned in the Bible. It's not mentioned in the Bible because the people in the Middle East, when the Bible was being written, hadn't any communication with the people in South America where the potatoes were. It's much like cats. Cats aren't mentioned in the Bible. Cats are godless animals. So it's little tweaks like that he brings up that are interesting. Because he talks about how they're deeply Catholic people in Ireland, when potatoes actually arrived in Ireland, they were super suspicious of it because, again, it was a godless vegetable. It wasn't mentioned in the Bible. So he talks through the history of actually how potato rearing, is that the right word? No, definitely not the right word. Potato herding. Let's go for potato herding because that's definitely wrong. Came about again in Ireland. It has absolutely everything, including recipes for potatoes. There's not a single thing that he has left out in this book. I will admit I went through this one relatively quickly because 800 pages on potatoes is enough to do anyone's head in. But it was genuinely interesting. I think I will go back and dip into this one every so often when I need a good potato fact to annoy my Irish friends with. I think that's really going to be the best bit for this book. So, as we do with all these, should you read this book? No, there's absolutely no good reason for anyone to read this book. It's a ridiculously interesting little piece that would look good on a coffee table, that you could pick up and read a chapter of and then put back down again. But this is not a novel in any way, shape or form. Don't read it unless you have a desperate desire to understand the history and social influence of the potato. Yeah. Okay. Next up, I think we're going to try get let's try and get Catch 22 done. That'll be the next one. Until then, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. Good afternoon.